Hello and welcome back to Outside Views. Today we need to talk about a promise that never came true. The so-called golden age that Brexit supporters once envisioned and that never arrived. Instead, 5 years after leaving the EU, Britain finds itself in a state of economic stagnation, political isolation and growing regret. Before the referendum, Brexit was sold as a path to prosperity. It was supposed to bring more money into public services and most notably the NHS. And it was supposed to reduce immigration. It was supposed to restore Britain's status as a global powerhouse, unshackled from EU bureaucracy. And 5 years later, the reality is far from what was promised. But let's start with the economy again. The economic impact of Brexit has been severe, even though it has not been an outright collapse as some predicted. It's more like a slow grinding decline, a flat tire rather than a car crash. But trade has taken a major hit. Between 2021 and 23, British exports to the EU fell by 27%, imports from the EU dropped by 32%. And for each EU country, Britain now exports 1,645 fewer product types than before. And smaller EU economies have been particularly affected by the loss of trade, but the impact on the UK has been even more damaging. The additional red tape has driven up costs for businesses and consumers alike. British companies now face bureaucratic hurdles and higher tariffs when dealing with their largest trading partner. And even everyday goods have become more expensive due to those Brexit-related import costs. One example is British customers now pay extra for Christmas trees from the EU simply because of new Brexit-related regulations. And that's just a small example of how Brexit has made life more expensive for the average customer. And now let's talk about migration again. I talked about it this week several times, but still. Because one of the central promises of Brexit was that it would allow Britain to take back control of its borders. And Brexit supporters claimed that by leaving the EU, the UK would reduce migration levels and prioritize British workers. And what actually happened? Migration did not decrease, it increased. While immigration from the EU has gone down, yes, migration from outside the EU has surged to record levels. And this has particularly affected industries that expected fewer migrants but instead saw an increase in foreign labor. And Brexit did not stop migration, it just changed where migrants come from. And new restrictive visa policies have created chaos in sectors like healthcare, where Britain still desperately needs foreign workers to keep services running. And the final issue is Britain's place in the world. Supporters of Brexit spoke about a vision of global Britain, a country that would be free to make its own trade deals and become an independent global leader. Yet, 5 years later, the UK is more isolated than ever. Yes, some new trade deals have been signed, but they have not made up for the loss of the EU market. And politically, Britain is no longer a major player in European affairs. Even though Labour's Keir Starmer has been making efforts to rebuild relations with the EU, he remains committed to keeping Britain outside the single market and outside the customs union. And this means Britain continues to operate under economic constraints that make trade and investment more difficult. The promised golden age of Brexit never arrived. Instead, Britain has higher costs, lower trade and increased migration, despite all the political rhetoric about taking back control. And the public knows it. A majority of Britons now believe Brexit was a mistake. The term regret, a combination of Brexit and regret, has become common in everyday conversation. Yet, despite this widespread regret, there is no clear plan for a way forward. Joining the EU again is not even being seriously considered by the government, with all its obstacles, my morning videos. The UK is stuck in a limbo, unable to fully benefit from its past EU membership, while also failing to capitalize on its post-Brexit independence. So where does Britain go from here? There are growing calls for a closer relationship with the EU. There is pressure to re-enter certain agreements, such as closer regulatory alignment to reduce trade friction. But any steps in that direction will be slow and politically difficult. The scars of Brexit run deep, but one thing is clear: the golden age that was promised never came. And the longer Britain stays on this path, the harder it will be to find a way back to prosperity. So thank you for watching Outside Views, and if you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below the video. See you next time, and one of the other videos is right here in the end screen.